Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from the Civil Service Examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss The Hindu Delhi edition dated 17th March 2022. The topics to be discussed have been displayed on your screen and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. So the question for the mains weekly answer writing practice is in front of you. The question says, economic empowerment of the women is a key to achieve the sustainable development goals. In the light of this statement, analyze the reasons for the decline in the female labor force participation rate in the Indian economy. You have to answer this question in 150 words, which means that this is a 10-marker question. So you are requested to submit your answers and get it evaluated by our expert evaluation team. In order to write better answers, you can refer to the DNS dated 8th March 2022, whereby Baswa sir has discussed this complete issue covering all the major dimensions. So once you go back to that DNS, learn through that DNS and then attempt a beautiful answer. So now we will begin with our first topic. This topic is very important and innovative in the sense that it is very important from the examination's point of view, and this topic gives you a different perspective about reimagining how our economy works. This topic mentions a key term, that is the circular economy. And this topic has appeared in today's article section at page number 6 in The Hindu New Delhi edition. This topic has come in the context that in the budget speech, our Finance Minister Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman emphasized the role of cleaner technologies such as solar energy and batteries in India's future economic growth. And that is why the key term is circular economy. Now this topic has intersection of economy as well as environment. Further, the finance minister in her budget speech also mentioned the importance of transitioning to a circular economy from the existing linear one. So in this very sense, you need to know that what is exactly mean by the circular economy and how the concept of circular economy is different from the present linear economy. As far as the UPSC scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic falls under the General Studies paper 3 in the section of economic development as well as environment. As we have already discussed, that circular economy is an overlapping section of economy as well as environment. So we'll take our discussion forward and first we'll understand that what is exactly mean by the linear economy and circular economy. So now this picture gives you a graphical representation of the linear economy versus the circular economy. Now as you can see in this picture, the first important difference of the linear economy and the circular economy is showcased by its very name. This economy works in the single direction. That is, you have extracted the natural resources from the earth, you take up those resources, you process or modify those resources and make them into useful products. And once you are done with those products, you dispose those products, generating a huge amount of waste. For example, let's say that you have taken out some metal from the earth's interior. And then you have used that very metal in order to build your own. Then you have used this vehicle and after let's say 4, 5 years or 10 years, you feel that now this vehicle is very outdated and you need to purchase a new car. You will dispose this vehicle generating huge amount of waste and you will purchase a new car. Now obviously I understand that this is true only in case you are very rich. You might feel that no sir, I will not dispose the car, we'll just resell that car, the second hand car, and it will be bought by someone else. So that is purely based on the economic level of your standard of living. Let us substitute the example of this car by your mobile phones. Now you will understand in a better fashion. Once you are bored with your mobile phone, so many often you do not sell that mobile phone, you just discard those mobile phones. Clear? So this is the linear economy. That is, you are taking up the resources, using those resources and then disposing those resources, generating the huge amount of waste. So that is why it is said that linear economy, the source of the linear economy, the energy on which the linear economy works, come from the finite sources. Because we know, for example, this metal, they are in a very restricted and limited quantity in our earth. So that is why the energy of this economy comes from the finite sources. Further, another important feature of the linear economy is that this is economy common to different type of resources. For example, the technical resources or the biological resources, no matter what type of resources are there, the linear economy works in a same fashion. That is, it does not differentiate between two or more different type of resources. But when we come to the circular economy, the first important thing is that the energy of this circular economy comes from the renewable sources. Let us understand how this works. Suppose we take up the similar example of, let's say, mobile phones. Now, what is happening is that big companies of smartphones are promoting the habit of consumerism. They are investing a lot of money in their commercial advertisement, that those advertisement create a strong appeal to the customer's mind. They get imprinted on your mind and you believe that yes, the next model of this very phone is going to be a very great one. Most of the time they just purchase new smartphones just because it is launched in the market. Now why is it happening? This is happening because the big smartphone companies are investing so much in their commercial advertisements that they are controlling your mind. They are building such a mental map in your mind that you are somewhat appealed to the new products. But the point is, let's say that just 6 to 7 months back you had purchased a new smartphone and now you want to purchase a newer one because it is an upgraded model. So you might discard your the older phone. But if you are following the principles of circular economy, the circular economy is not based on single time disposition of the materials. First of all, circular economy differentiates between different types of resources, for example, biological materials as well as technical materials. So, what they do is that from the earth system, they extract the materials and they make the useful products. That means that up to this stage, the process is same. But this does not happen in the circular economy. They make the products, they consume the products, and then they reuse those products and further enrich those products. That means they will not again dug up the earth to make new resources, to extract new resources, to make new products. No, they will not. They will just reuse those very products. Okay, so the point is that if the materials are biological, they will further enrich those products, and if the materials are technical, for example, mobile phones, cars, other vehicles, electronic devices, they will return those things and then they will again make, then again use. So the point is that this economy will work in a circular fashion. This is known as circular economy. And that is why the important principle of the circular economy is the reusing of the products. Now these products can be anything which is available there in market. That can be clothes, that can be metals, that can be electronic products, that can be anything. If you are reusing the products or you are recycling the products, all these things come under the circular economy. You all must be aware about the concept of 3 R's. Now, what is these 3 R's? 3 R's is recycling, reusing, and reducing. So, all these three are the principles of circular economy. And that is why the circular economy helps to eliminate the waste generation. Technically, if not elimination, but they reduce the waste generation up to a very huge extent. Further, they circulate the products, we have already discussed it, and they regenerate the nature. They do not exploit the nature. The linear economy exploits the nature, but the circular economy regenerates the nature. And that is how the circular economy is useful in tackling the climate change, global warming, biodiversity losses. So the circular economy not only have the environmental benefits, the circular economy also have the socio-economic benefits. Why? Because they are cost effective. For example, once the metal has been extracted from the earth and the cost has been invested, and in the first cycle of selling and buying of this product, the cost of extracting the metal has been incurred. But when you reuse that particular material, you are not again extracting. So the cost of extracting the resources from the earth gets subtracted in the next cycle, and that is why it will not add up to the cost of production, and hence the end consumer will buy that very product in a very low cost. For example, the price difference between the new car and the second hand car. So that is why it becomes cost effective, and particularly for those people who do not have very high standard of living, it also becomes a mean of raising their socio cultural standards. Their living standards get increased because now they are able to purchase those products, right? So the circular economy not only have the environmental benefits but also the socio economic benefits. And that is why our Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has advocated towards the transitioning to a circular economy. And in this very regard, this article also provides us a future strategy that what can government or we as an individual can take in order to transition towards circular economy. So that is why in this sense we now will look at the future strategy. So, the first thing which this article says is that the government must define the responsibilities of multiple stakeholders which are involved in collecting, processing, reusing, recycling of the waste. You all are aware about the concept of extended producer responsibility, which in common language means that if you have generated the waste, then you are responsible for the collection of that waste also. That is the producer responsibility. In the extended producer responsibility, the responsibility of this managing the waste was laid on multiple stakeholders. But we know that in our waste management ecosystem, which India presently have, is largely unorganized and very complex in nature. And we have multiple stakeholders into this process. We have manufacturers, we have exporters, we have importers, we have assemblers, we have rag pickers. So there are multiple stakeholders which are involved in our waste management ecosystem, and that too complex and having unorganized nature. So this article says that first of all, government must come up with the clear rules and regulations in order to define the responsibilities of all these stakeholders. The second important step, this article says that government must come up with regulations to ban the dumping and burning of the waste. Now we all know that burning of the waste is one of the easiest sought means by various people in order to get rid of that waste. Either they burn that waste or they dump that waste on the grounds available near to their homes. So now this dumping and burning is very toxic in nature. It not only leads to air pollution, but it also leads to soil as well as water pollution, because these toxic materials get leached into the soil or water during rainfall. And this leaching of toxic materials is very harmful for the entire ecosystem, of which we are also an important part. The third important step which must be done is that government as well as the private sector must invest in their research and development program in order to increase the efficiency and productivity of those machines. Now here is one very important point, that in order to increase the efficiency and productivity, we cannot forget the cost involved in designing those machines. Because let's say that you have designed some machine which was earlier available at rupees 1 lakh, and now you have made the machine which does the same function of rupees, let's say, 1 crore. But yes, this machine is very climate friendly, but still the buyers will not buy it because its cost is so high. You have raised the cost of that machine multiple times that the buyers will not use it. So your entire objective will be defeated. That is why it is said that there should be a balance between economic viability as well as environmental desirability. Now, these two things must be balanced, and that is why efficiency and productivity are one component, the low cost is the another component. The fourth important thing is, in order to build these low cost machines, innovative financial mechanism must be established. For example, the banks must come up with the lower rate of interest on the products which are climate friendly. For example, if the investors are investing into renewable energy products, the rate of interest on those things should be lower. Second, performance based green certificate can be used in order to raise the finance. Those companies who are performing well, for example, their carbon dioxide emissions are well below the standards, well below the norms, then they can be issued certain green certificates which can be traded in the market, and from that market they can raise their finance. Further, the green bonds or the blue bonds can also be used in order to raise the finance. Now, green and blue bonds are the debt instruments, and the finance used by these bonds can be specifically used in the climate or the environment friendly things. That is why the name is green bonds or the blue bonds. And the last important thing, which is very important from the India's perspective, is that we need to formalize our waste management ecosystem. Until and unless we are not able to formalize this, we will not be able to keep records, we will not be able to trace and track the entire path of our products. So this is the future strategy which you people can also write in your mains examinations answer. Now let us revise this topic in brief once again. Now this topic has appeared in the context of the finance minister's speech regarding transitioning to a circular economy during her budget session. After this, we learned what is the basic difference between the linear economy and circular economy. We learned that circular economy is based on the principles of reduce, recycle, and reuse, whereas the linear economy is just a unidirectional economy whereas there is no concept of reducing, reusing, and recycling. Next, we discussed that the circular economy not only provides us with the environmental benefits, but it also provides us with the socio-economic benefits. And in the last, we discussed what future strategy can be adopted by government, by private sector, as well as by individuals in order to transition towards the circular economy and achieve our goals of economic growth as well as environmental preservation simultaneously. Now we will move on with our next topic. This topic is inclusive education. However, here the topic is restricted to the inclusion of the disabled people. So because the context of this very article is that recently the UGC has released the draft accessibility guidelines and standards for higher education institutions and universities. Now these guidelines are not very much relevant from the examinations point of view, but what is more relevant is that you need to be aware about the issues which this specific section face in order to have education, and more specifically the higher education. As far as the UPSC scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic falls under the General Studies paper 2 under the section of social justice and micro section of the issues relating to the education and human resources. So that is why in the continuation of this very discussion, we'll take up the issues which are faced by the disabled section and suggestions which can be deployed in order to make the higher education more accessible to the disabled section. But my objective will be not to restrict only to the key points of this, but I will also try to make you think that how can you approach towards this particular topic or some other topics which is related to this topic. For example, if you have to find out issues in any area, like here we are talking about disabled section, you might be asked issues related to some other areas in your mains examinations. So whether you have to discuss the issues or whether you have to think about these suggestions, always go into deeper analysis that what are the different components of that particular sector of which the question is being asked. For example, here the question is being asked about the disabled population and their education, that is higher education. So that is why we'll look at the life cycle of the whole education process, and then we'll see that what are the different issues which are faced by the disabled section. Now, first of all, before the admission into the higher education institutions, the disabled section face the issue of their exact degree of disability, because on that degree their certificate depends, and multiple times it has been witnessed that the disability was up to a very huge extent, but the certificate issued by various officers were of lower category, and that is why those people could not get the true benefit of the reservation which they deserved of. So that is why the disability assessment must be guaranteed in higher education institutions. So that is why the suggestion is that it should be done at the pre-entry stage as well as the post-entry stage, because there are certain disabilities which can be cured with time. Now let's say that a person has entered into the college of BTech or MBBS where the degree is of around 4 years, 5 years. So it might happen that certain curative treatments can be done in order to tackle that particular student's disability and he can be made perfectly able. So in that very sense, the pre-entry as well as the post-entry assessment of disability and that too continuous regular assessment must be done. Now the second important component of the higher education is obviously the reading part. Now, majority of the study materials which are available in our higher education institutions is not disabled friendly. You just yourself imagine that how many books have been written in Braille so that our that section of population which is visually impaired can get the true education. That is why it is suggested that the steps must be taken in order to grant the access to the study materials. Then third is the extracurricular part, and this is the most important component of the education about which we generally tend to forget. For example, you just yourself think that whenever you have to write an answer on disability, accessibility of disabled section in higher education institutions, how many of you will think about the accessibility towards the playground? Because our minds have been trained in such a manner that automatically we are not able to visualize the study part of the education as well as the enjoyment part of the education, that is the which is in the form of extracurricular activities. We do not see them together. So that is why always keep these things in mind, because it will showcase your observing capacity as well as your multidimensional aspect. Okay, so that is why the steps must be taken in order to provide great accessibility towards the playgrounds. For example, in certain functions and festivals which are to be organized in colleges and universities, the infrastructure which is going to be built in those functions and festivals must cater to the needs of the disabled section. For example, we must provide the ramp facilities along with the stair facilities or the lift facilities. Correct? Next important component is the disability removal, and for this, the medical as well as psychological support in the universities must be provided in order to tackle the disability. You remember in the first point we discussed that it might happen that during 4 to 5 years of course the disability might get reduced. But the point is that how will it get reduced? It will only get reduced when we are able to provide the required medical as well as psychological support. The next important component of education, and that too in the post COVID times, is the digital means. Now we all know that digital education is also one of the crucial aspect of today's education and one of the most neglected aspect as far as the disabled section is concerned. And hence we must take steps in order to improve and enhance the accessibility towards our digital resources. And the last important component is the mental well being, the mental issues which these students actually face in colleges and universities. Most often they are bullied by their seniors or by their batchmates. And in order to prevent this, the universities must come up with effective grievance redressal mechanisms so that the disabled section can directly approach to the grievance redressal mechanisms and certain punitive and strict actions can be taken against those students who tend to regularly bully the disabled students. So this was a very brief topic, and moreover this topic was more of a type of brainstorming session, but I am very sure that you must have gained something through this. Now we will move on with the next topic. This topic is in relation to the United Nations and has appeared on page number 7. This topic is in the context that recently you must have heard that India has remained absent in recent UNSC voting against Russian war on Ukraine. So, being absent during the time of voting in the United Nations has a specific and clear message that India is neutral on its position. Neither India has voted against Russia, neither India has voted in favor of Russia. India has chosen to remain absent. So, in this very regard, what is important from the UPSC's examinations perspective is that we should be aware about the United Nations as a whole. So, under today's session, we will discuss about one specific part, that is United Nations Security Council. We will discuss that what is UNSC, its structure, why UNSC reforms are needed and what are the specific areas where UNSC reforms are needed, and then we'll discuss in the end that what is the case for India's permanent membership stake at United Nations. As far as the UPSC scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic falls under the General Studies Paper 2 section International Relations. So now let us begin our discussion. First of all, we must know that UNSC stands for United Nations Security Council, and this is a principal crisis management body, and it has the power to issue binding obligations. Now, this word is important, binding obligations on all the members of the United Nations. It has three core roles. First is ensuring the international peace and security. Second is UNSC has its role in selection and appointment of the new members to the United Nations. It gives its recommendation to the General Assembly of the United Nations. And third is any change in the UN Charter or any modification in the UN Charter must be approved by the United Nations Security Council. And when we talk about the UNSC, the most important thing is the P5 group. Now, what is P5? We'll discuss it. UNSC has two types of members. One are the permanent members and other are the non-permanent members. Now there are five permanent members which are known as P5, that is permanent 5. Now these members, as the name signifies, are permanent in nature. China, France, Russia, UK and USA. Now these five countries are permanent members, and the most special thing about permanent members are that they have a veto power. Now veto power means that on any issue which is being debated in UNSC, these countries have the veto power. For example, let's say if country A attacks the country B and UNSC decides to sanction the country A, and just one country out of these five countries votes against this sanction, that sanction cannot be imposed on it because that particular country has vetoed it. But the problem is that this veto power is only available to these five countries. The next are the non-permanent members, which are 10 in number, and they are appointed on rotation basis, giving adequate representation on geographical terms. That means all the continents will be given adequate representation. But this geographical representation is restricted only to the non-permanent membership and not to the permanent membership. Now, there are certain issues and challenges in which UN is lacking, and that is why we need reforms in certain areas. Now, first of all, if you closely analyze that these are the five permanent members, and out of these, just look USA, UK, and Russia, and the erstwhile, which was known as Soviet Union in the post World War II era, were the major powers. And that is why this permanent membership symbolizes the World War II period, post World War II period. And that is why there is a power disbalance among these five countries and the other complete world. But now, if we talk about the present situation, that geopolitical situation has changed a lot. Now, country like India is emerging with its full might. Now, there is a huge socio-economic and cultural importance of the countries of Africa. For example, Japan is one of the most industrialized nations of not only Asia but of the whole world. Similarly, Brazil has also its importance at the global geopolitical level. So the point is that presently the geopolitical situation has changed a lot since World War II, and that is why there must be a reform and UN must do away with this restricted five permanent member formula. The second important thing is that if you closely again understand this membership, only one country, that is China, is from Asia, right? So there is inequitable representation. Europe is overrepresented because Europe as a continent is very small and it supports a very minuscule share of world population. But if you see the countries, we have France and UK from Europe. Then Asia, we have discussed, is underrepresented because Asia is a very huge continent, but we have just one representative, that is China. And Africa and South America, so large continents, but they have zero representation. The third major issue is of legitimacy and credibility, the latest example being the Russian-Ukraine war. In the past also there have been several invasions, for example in Libya, in Egypt, in Iraq, Syria, Yemen. So there have been continuous invasions going on across the world, but UNSC has failed to stop those invasions and take the necessary steps. That is why in present times UNSC face the crisis of legitimacy and credibility. The north south divide is the continuation of this very issue, because if you divide the world into two halves, that is north and south, most of the countries, for example, China, France, Russia, UK, and USA, all these countries are in the north. Then the latest issue is that present times are witnessing the emerging new issues to which UNSC is completely new. For example, in present times, due to globalization, economic interdependence is rising. Environmental degradation has become one of the most widespread threatening phenomena for the entire humanity. And moreover, the transnational threats, for example, terrorism, is becoming highly modified. Now we have cyber attacks. Now the organized crime is becoming high tech. So presently UNSC is not able to cater all these emerging issues. And the last issue is the relationship between the Security Council and General Assembly of the United Nations. There have been a lack of coordination and continuous friction among these two parts. So these are the broader reforms which are needed in UNSC. Now we will discuss the case for India's permanent membership, because India is one of the torchbearer to reform the UNSC. So whenever we have to discuss the case for some country, we must look the geopolitical significance of that particular country. And that is why we will analyze the geopolitical significance of India also in this regard. First of all, India has around 1/6 of the global population. That means the demographic power is huge with India. Second is, India is the largest democracy of the world, and that is why it is believed that India's entry into UNSC will provide UNSC with the required democratic values. For example, we all are aware about the hardcore geopolitical stance of countries like USA, Russia, and China. If India enters into the permanent five grouping, then it is believed that India will stand for those countries who are not very strong, and thereby will put their democratic principles and values into UNSC. Next comes the economic might. Now, factually, India was the fifth largest economy in 2019, and as far as the purchasing power parity is concerned, India ranks third globally. So that means that India is among the top five economic powers. Now come military. India is a responsible nuclear power, being the third largest military spender and one of the largest standing armies. Further, India's contribution to the United Nations is also very huge. India is the largest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping operations, which majorly is deployed in the countries of Africa. So that means that India's contribution to United Nations is also very huge. First, at the geopolitical scale also, the latest example again being the Russian-Ukrainian war. India has active participation in the global geopolitics. Further, India is also one of the four members. The grouping is known as G4 members. India is a member along with Brazil, Germany, and Japan. And the major goal of G4 grouping is to reform the United Nations Security Council, and all these countries support each other's bid for the permanent membership in the UNSC. So today's reference article is in relation to the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Now this particular scheme, and in this relation this particular act, is very important as far as the UPSC examination is concerned. And that is why multiple times it has been already covered under the DNS sessions. For example, if you need to know all the dimensions associated with this particular scheme and act, its issues, challenges, way ahead, positives, All the dimensions have already been covered in the DNS dated 1st February 2022 by Faizan sir. As you can see that sir has discussed that how this particular scheme is the backbone of the rural economy in difficult times. Further, the suggestions for the improvement have already been discussed by sir under this session. So that is why you are requested to go back to that DNS in order to completely understand this particular topic. So now is the time for the question of the day. The question from yesterday's DNS dated 16th of March 2022 was in relation to the net metering. The question asked that net metering is sometimes seen in the news in the context of promoting the, and as you can see, the option A, that is production and use of solar energy by the households/consumers, is the correct answer. The question from today's DNS is in relation to the circular economy. The question says, with reference to the circular economy, consider the following statements. There are two statements given. First is, extended producer responsibility guidelines issued under Plastic Waste Management Rules 2016 promotes circular economy. Statement 2 says, circular economy helps to protect the environment, ensure wise use of natural resources, develop new sectors, create jobs, and develop new capabilities. You have to find the correct statements out of the given two statements. And now there is a small announcement from our side. First of all, we wish you a very happy Holi in advance. And second thing, that because of this only, we will not be taking up the DNS session tomorrow. However, day after tomorrow onwards, we will take up the DNS session on regular basis. So that's all for today. All the very best, study hard, and have a happy, colorful, and joyful Holi.